Hello, my friend.
Hello.
All right, I apologize for putting you on the spot. I know you're not. You don't
Comfortable
love
with
being
this
in front
kind
of
of thing?
camera. You don't
No.
love. I mean, Adam's social media presence here at Iconic has made you a little bit of a star. And
gosh,
so,
yeah.
especially last season when you were working with Westby and that kind of thing, you'd have
Yeah.
people coming up to you and going, "Oh my God, Olly!"
Yeah, I know you work at Iconic.
and you were like,
yeah.
"I just want to work." And
Yeah.
no, that's why I love you. But
Yeah.
I am going to put you on the spot here.
Okay.
Yesterday, I did a social media video with you
Mm-hmm.
where I asked you of all your bikes you've had, what are the ones that you most regret selling?
Yeah.
And you mentioned a Yamaha R7,
Yeah.
the OW01, not the new one. Oh, sorry, OW02,
Yeah.
apologies. 02,
Yeah.
which is a cool bike, but you also mentioned an RS125.
RS125. Yeah.
And we got a bunch of people saying like, oh, I want to hear more from Olly about this.
Okay.
So now is your time to shine.
Time.
So can you, let's back up a little bit. Let's start from the beginning. What exactly was the bike? How did you get it? And then I got a couple more questions for you.
God, I've got to wind the clock back a long way. It's like
okay.
over 30 years. But
Yeah.
so how I happened to come by the bike? It was Neil Hodgson's British Championship winning '92 RS125. So it's the year before he went to Grand Prix. He went to Grand Prix first in 1993. So wind back the clock a little bit. My brother and my dad, we were always into two-strokes, 125s, 250s. And at the time, my dad had a Ducati 900 SS, but it was tied with a clutch. My brother already had a NSR 250 through a company called B&M Imports in England, which is now Fastline, where it's guy who runs it is Gary Mitchell. His brother is Kevin Mitchell, 500 Grand Prix rider at the time. So Gary was sponsoring Kevin in 500 Grand Prix, and he was sponsoring Neil Hodgson in 125 British Championship road racing. And my dad knew Gary pretty well because he sold his Ducati, bought a brand new Rothmans NSR 250 through B&M Imports, and so they already had a good relationship. And we always used to go to the British Motorcycle Grand Prix, and that year, 1992, I decided to do the Yamaha riding school, FZR 400 RRSPs, the day after the Grand Prix. Because I kind of had an idea that I might want to start racing, but I didn't know whether I was going to be competitive or whatever. So I did the race school the day after the Grand Prix, and at the end, the instructor said, "Look, have you ever thought about riding or racing? Kind of, you might have a chance of actually doing something." So kind of the seed was sown then, and because of my dad's relationship with Gary at B&M Imports, he said, "Look, Neil's bike at the end of the year will be available." And at the time, we didn't know he was going to win. He actually won 3 British Championships. I think it was a British Championship, Super Cup, and there was under 23 or under 21. So at the end, he became like a 3-time British champion in 1992. And we'd already done the deal to buy his race bike. So exciting day. The nerves always are that if you buy anybody's bike, you're never going to quite get what they raced. And
Parts get pulled off.
Parts get pulled off. And, they said, look, the tuner at the time, who was actually ex-125 racer, he actually went on to be the main engineer behind the Fogarty Petronas project. So he was a smart dude, but he was into Del Auto carburetors. So they pulled the Del Auto carburetor off, but supposedly everything else was the same as what Neil raced. So I went and picked the bike up, but I was keen to find out how good it was. So I picked the bike up and I went to a guy called Frank Rattle, who was just around the corner in England, and put the bike on the dyno. And obviously Frank was interested in finding what the British Championship bike level was at, because he was tuning other guys' bikes, but this was Neil's bike, and we put it on the dyno, and it was worse than stock. I mean, it was better in a few areas, but in reality it wasn't. It was certainly
like 38 horsepower.
38 horsepower, right? Yeah. I mean, where the stock.
Yeah.
I mean, the stock one back then would have been 3940, and a championship level sort of bike would be 44 maybe, But the big deal back in those days, I mean, it's 30 years ago, so I don't think the guys care about it too much, was the fuel that people were running. Everyone normally was running avgas. I think the cap for octane was 102 back in the day, and so if you mix 100 low lead avgas with oil, that drops the octane to 89, 90. But all these guys, the top guys, are running at like 101 point whatever. You weren't allowed to mix fuel, but all they were testing was the octane. They didn't. So all these top level British Championship guys, they're all fuel chemists. Everyone knew it, but so you could obviously run a lot more compression, ignition timing, and that's where the power came from. So it probably was exactly as he raced it without the Del Auto carb, but obviously they were running a lot more compression, probably better ignition timing or more ignition timing, and they were getting the power that way.
So what was the fuel that you think that these chemists
Well, they were
running?
mixing. I don't know the different I don't know.
Okay.
We never. This was the thing. You always wanted to know what the top guys are running. You'd be warming the bike up, and you would walk around the back of it. It'd be just like the smell of pearl drops. It was crazy.
Smell of what? Sorry.
Pearl drops. Candy. Smelled like candy.
Oh, that's a British reference that I don't understand.
Yeah.
Pearl drops. Okay.
Pearl drops.
Okay.
But I mean, it was a difference between going from like a 38 horsepower bike to with a lot, low to mid 40s. So,
okay, fair enough.
But at the end of the day, that part didn't really matter because I was going to do club racing. The bike was amazing.
Okay.
So I started, in England you have to do 10 races as a novice. You have to wear your little orange jacket, finish races. And at the beginning, the plan is just to see how far you can get. Well, there was no plan. You had no idea how competitive you were going to be. So it was like you start this run and you cross your fingers and everything, you're actually going to be half decent. But until you start racing, you don't know. And I got through my 10 races as a novice. Then it was club racing, with the dream then of getting to nationals, to race on the national circuit, so to speak. So then after that, you do 10 more races, you get decent results, and then you get into nationals. So back end of '93, this would be, I did a couple of nationals, did pretty well in it. And, going back to the original question is, which bike do you regret selling? So last race I ever did in '93 was called the Power Bike International Brands Hatch Indy Circuit. I was living down in London at the time doing an apprenticeship, so it was my local track, short circuit. I knew it reasonably well, and there was two guys who unfortunately neither of them are with us anymore. Mick Lofthouse killed at the Isle of Man TT, and then Robert Dunlop killed at the Northwest 200, Joey's younger brother. They were riding the new, Yamaha was going to come out with a new TZ125 in '94 as a production bike. Now, Robert was riding the pre-pro bike for Clive Padgett, and Mick Lofthouse was riding one for Dennis Trollope. And the thing was, if you were interested in buying the new production bike in '94 Yamaha, you could test the pre-pro bike at the end after the race. So a lot of people signed up for it. The Honda at that point was the old NF4, based on our CR125 engine, a little bit sort of prehistoric. And so Yamaha was coming out with this new bike, cassette gearbox, power valve cylinder, all the bells and whistles. And so it was appealing to everyone. It was expensive, it was £9,000. And so we all tested the bike. The bike was super impressive, but little did we know it wasn't, it was a pre-pro bike, but it had been fettled.
Yeah, so let me interrupt you here, I apologize. So for those of us that don't have the kind of race experience that you have and that kind of thing, so you say that Yamaha would let you test it after the race.
After the race.
So, but what does that really mean? So you like the track is still so was that
Brands Hatch Indy? Yeah.
So it was after the racing happened and the track was still open. And it was kind of like, hey, if you would like to buy this, you can run some laps on the bike.
See it, evaluate it, see what you think. Your perspective will allow people that were of the ability to, people that showed expressed an interest in buying the new bike, basically. So if you were interested in buying the new bike, you could test it the day afterwards.
Did you have to put a deposit down?
No. Okay. I mean, obviously most of the people had raced the day before, so you do 2 or 3 laps on it, evaluate. You think it's a viable option for next year, and that was a mistake. The bike performed well. I mean, Robert and Mick had raced it the day before.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't a mistake. They just lied to you.
They misrepresented the bike. They misled us. The bike, when it came out, it was a lot of money. It didn't perform that well. Yeah. A lot of guys that were sponsored went back to Honda, and then in '95, Honda came out with a new RS125, which basically ran the full course all the way to the end. And the Yamaha, it was uncompetitive, really. So. In hindsight, I should have kept the '92 championship winning bike that I raced through club racing in '93, and then my first year in '94 would have been nationals on a bike that I was familiar with, that I knew the performance of and whatnot. Instead, we took a gamble with the Yamaha, and it turned out that it wasn't that great. So that's my regret. If I could wind back the clock, I would have kept the Honda. I wouldn't have bought the Yamaha. And then in '95, they would have come out with a new bike. Honda did. Which the Honda on the small bike, the 125, the Honda was always the bike to have. Unless you could afford an Aprilia or something like that. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, hey, we'll cut the video here. Yeah. Because I know you got a lot more stories, and we'll do separate videos about that.
Okay.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
For sharing this. And thank you for watching. If you have questions for Olly, like I said, we're gonna get more into his race history in separate videos. He's got to get back to work.
Yeah.
He's got bikes that he needs to be working on. So, but if you have questions, about what Olly's told you just now, or if there's other things you want to learn from him or hear from him, let us know in the comments. And I guess that's all we got. Thank you, my friend.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Appreciate it.